Okay, so the first story we'll talk about is A&P by John Updike. What I'd like to ask you to do with each of these stories is first to open up, to go under week 3 to the link lecture/slide, which is actually slideshow. They don't have enough room for that. But click on that, and then you'll see, to view the John Updike slideshow, click here, Alice Walker, Raymond Carver, and so on. So the first thing I want you to do is to click on the John Updike slideshow. I've done with each of these stories what I did with the poetry and the first 2 stories, and that is to give you some slides, just running through some of the what might be more troublesome vocabulary. And I hope by understanding that the story will make sense to you. So under A&P, the first slide after the title page, of course, is just some five points, biographical information about John Updike. Just a few interesting facts about him. Some of this information may be helpful in answering quiz questions. If there's information that can't be found in the pages I give you in the textbook about these authors, information will be found on these slides. So the first one is about John Updike. By the way, he's still alive. I went to a conference a few years ago. He was there. He's a national treasure. Everyone loved him. He's a very funny author. Interesting thing about him too is that he has been very successful in writing across several genres. Some authors, they're poets, or they're short story writers, or they're novelists, but very rarely are they as good or as prolific in all of those different categories, and John Updike is. I happen to be a dog lover. Thought my dog was behind me. I have a golden retriever, but she was sleeping behind me just a minute ago. But John Updike wrote a poem called Dog's Death. I would not recommend reading it if you're already depressed. But if you love dogs, you love animals, that is a real tearjerker. It will really pull on your heartstrings. It's one of my favorite poems by him. Anyhow, the story A&P has a different terminology. The first one, of course, is on this third slide that you'll see there, is Salem. This is a reference to the Massachusetts town that where they had the witch trials. In the story, Sammy, the clerk, is when the 3 girls walk in their bathing suits, he's staring at them and completely distracted from ringing up the purchase of a woman who was standing right there. He ends up accidentally ringing it up twice. He forgot that he had done it, so he did it again. She's screaming at him. He makes a reference to her. If she had been born back then, that she might have been, executed. So it's a very subtle reference to her being a witch. So that's that. The next one is prima donna. This is, the definition is an extremely sensitive, vain, or undisciplined person. But usually this term is used in reference to women, girls, more so than men. So prima donna. And of course this term is used in reference to Queenie. The next word, prim, means stiffly formal and proper. Some people walk this way in a prim manner, or they simply conduct themselves in a prim way, but it's stiffly formal and proper. Nothing wrong with being formal and proper, but prim is a little overboard. House slaves. Now this is meant to mean housewives or homemakers. Just a little negative connotation there by calling them house slaves, as a reference to them living less than desirable lives. The next slide starts with drinks the color of water, and the reference here is most likely to martinis. What he's talking about are the people having parties at Queenie's house are probably more upper class than the people he is related to, or the people that he hangs out with. His family drinks Schlitz, malt liquor, beer. Queenie's family drinks the color of water, which means they're upper class, they're a little bit more sophisticated. Doesn't mean that they're smarter, it means that they're higher up on the economic scale. The third term, okay, we already talked about Schlitz. This was a beer that was very popular back when I was a teenager. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was a lot more popular. I really have no idea if it's popular these days. I just never hear people talk about it. The third term, kingpin. Now we usually hear this word in reference to drug kingpin, but the word kingpin is broader. It just means the chief person in a group or undertaking. But because it's been used so often with drug kingpin, kingpin has taken on a very negative connotation. But that's what is meant here. Anyway, so that's that. So let's get to the discussion questions. And I mentioned that the discussion questions can be found under doc sharing. They're at the bottom of the list. Also, before I forget to tell you, I've uploaded the midterm exam review. Don't forget, I see that 6 people have already downloaded it. Make sure you download that. You can remember the 4 handouts: Introduction to Literature, Introduction to Poetry, Introduction to the Short Story, and that's it, actually, for the midterm. For the final exam, you will need the Intro to Drama, but don't have to worry about that for now. Still, download all 4 of those so you're at least set for the final exam. Those first 3 handouts, though, will provide some information that will be on the midterm. Also, all of the quizzes that you've taken for poetry and the short stories, I'll be drawing questions from those quizzes to put on the final exam as well. I'm sorry, on the midterm exam as well. So, okay, let's get started on the questions for A and P. The first one says, contrast Sammy's initial reaction to Queenie and the girls with his final attitude toward them and his subsequent heroic act. By the way, as we're going through, as you're viewing these videos, stop them at any time if you need to open up a document or you need to open your book and look at the things that I'm referencing. One other note, I should have said this sooner, but you should read all of these stories before you actually view these videos. So if you haven't read A and P yet, I've already given you the terminology here. Pause the video, read the story, and then come back. It'll be very anticlimactic if I'm spoiling the story for you by jumping around like I'll end up doing. So anyway, the first question. Contrast Sammy's initial reaction to Queenie and the girls with his final attitude toward them and his subsequent heroic act. This is the climax of the story happens when his attitude changes and drives him to action. So, so what is his initial reaction? Well, he does what everybody in the store is doing, and while